A federal grand jury has opted not to indict several Democratic lawmakers over a video they recorded urging members of the military not to follow what they called illegal orders. Let me just quickly remind you of a bit of what they said.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
Joining me now to talk us through this and a whole lot more is good friend of the program, political journalist John Fund. John, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Look, I don't know about you, but that video really seemed to sail very close to the line of calling for a break in the Commander-in-Chief's order of business in terms of being the chain of command. What did you make of that video, and do you think the grand jury got it right here in not going further with it?
Well, look, anyone who goes to our military academies and ultimately commands troops is trained that you don't have to obey an illegal order. And there are scenarios and discussions about what constitutes an illegal order. At the most charitable interpretation, this was a political ploy by a bunch of publicity-seeking congressmen and women to beat their chests and pretend to be, big boys and girls. I think it was a political stunt. I think it backfired. And I think rather than the grand jury indicting them, I think just leaving them in sort of mild ridicule is probably the best course of action. I don't think anyone wanted a trial here, and I think a trial would only have turned them into martyrs.
Yeah, no, look, I think you're right about that, but boy, it is concerning when you see people in positions of responsibility acting so irresponsibly. John, I want to ask you about another report here, which I think has implications not just for the U.S., but also here in Australia. A report has warned that the far-left group Democrat Socialists of America, or the DSA, is, in its words, undermining the U.S. by driving protests. Something called the Network Contagion Research Institute has found that the DSA's rhetoric matches the anti-U.S. propaganda of foreign adversaries. They've been involved in these anti-ICE protests in the wake of the Minneapolis shootings and the protests against supermarket giant Target. How concerning is the prospect of foreign interference driving left-wing politics in the U.S.?
Well, there's one guarantee. Such allegations are made, and of course, they're always dismissed by the legacy media. Well, in the 1980s, we now know that the Soviet Union was financing the anti-nuclear efforts against the installation of U.S. missiles in Germany and other places. We know that during the pandemic, many of the anti-Semitic demonstrations at Columbia and other places had Iranian money behind it. So should it surprise anyone that the Democratic Socialists of America are being supported by their socialist comrades overseas? We may not be able to attach bank account to signs being made right away, but I suspect in a few months we'll have that information.
Yeah, the Iranian link is very curious given how little protest there has been about the regime in Iran and the abuses it's committing against its citizens versus the outrage there's been about Israel and their conduct in Gaza. Hey, I want to also talk about another massive move here in the U.S. where just hours ago, President Trump overturned an Obama-era regulation called the endangerment finding, which was apparently used for all sorts of environmental regulations, including that thing in your car that makes the engine turn off when you hit a stoplight. Here's a little bit of what Trump said earlier.
Under the process just completed by the EPA, we are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding, a disastrous Obama-era policy that severely damaged the American auto industry and massively drove up prices for American consumers. Prices went up incredibly for a worse product.
I know there's been a lot of talk about Trump getting the Nobel Prize. I reckon just for getting rid of that stupid, annoying little glitch that they put in your cars, he should possibly get some sort of international recognition. What do you reckon?
Remember, he also got rid of the restrictions on toilets and dishwashers and other things. Soon we'll have appliances that actually work and do the job they're intended to do. The endangerment finding repeal is a big deal. Our Constitution, your Constitution, is set up so that the legislature makes the laws, the executive carries them out. But in the United States and in many other countries, unelected bureaucrats have been handed that responsibility. And even though Congress would never have passed this, in 2009 under Obama, they passed this endangerment finding saying climate change is so endangering the planet that we have to have unelected bureaucrats regulate greenhouse gas emissions, regulate the auto industry, regulate the fuel mileage on cars. Well, they didn't have any authority to do that. The Supreme Court, in a series of recent decisions, has made that clear. So now, finally, we're having that rolled back. If you want to change public policy, you actually have to go out and convince people to then convince their members of Congress to pass the law. Otherwise, you can't play dictator.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, finally, John, we started talking about chain of commands. Let's end by talking about chain of commands. There was a hearing involving a Democrat sheriff from North Carolina, and it was all about that terrible story of that Ukrainian woman, that refugee who was murdered in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, Sheriff Gary McFadden, he turns out wasn't so hot on chain of command and how the government works. Just have a look at this and try not to cringe too much.
What branch of government do you operate under?
Mecklenburg County.
What branch of government do you operate under, Sheriff?
Constitution of the United States.
Correct. That is what establishes the branches of government. I'm asking which branch you fall under.
Mecklenburg County. I'm a duly sworn Mecklenburg County Sheriff. We answer to the people of Mecklenburg County.
This was not where I was anticipating getting stuck. Are you aware of how many branches of government there are?
No.
Sounds like the sheriff needs to go back to school.
Well, it's even worse than that. He's a former veteran. He's a former police officer. You would have thought at some point in his training he would have been taught this or maybe retained this, and obviously he didn't. It is frightening. We've heard about the collapse of civic education in the United States. Here's Exhibit A, B, and C. We have somebody who we pay to enforce the laws, to carry a gun, to basically command dozens and dozens of troopers, and he doesn't know the first thing about where his authority comes from.
Unbelievably shocking, John. John Fund, thank you so much, as always, for your time. Now, stick around because after the break, we've got more Mamdani madness. But first, the world's first American Pope, Pope Leo, a proud Chicagoite, has weighed in on one of the greatest theological debates of all times. No, not faith versus works, but mustard versus ketchup. Have a look.
God bless you. From Chicago, you've had more hot dogs than any pope in history.
God bless you.
Only with mustard. Thank you, sir. Mustard and
God bless you.
The Holy Father has spoken. Mustard only on your hot dogs. Amen, your holiness.